A cowboy found a runaway bride hiding in his stable, never imagining she'd heal his wounded past. The cowboy woke before the sun, as he always did. Morning came quietly on his ranch, without alarms or voices, only the slow sound of wind moving through dry grass and the soft breathing of horses in the stable. He lay still for a moment, staring at the wooden ceiling above his bed, listening to the silence he had grown used to over the years. Silence had become his companion. It did not ask questions. It did not leave. He got up, pulled on worn jeans, a faded shirt, and boots scarred by time and work. His movements were calm and practiced, like a man who had lived the same day many times before. Outside, the sky was pale blue, the air cool, carrying the smell of earth and hay. The land stretched wide and empty around him, just the way he liked it. This ranch had been his escape and his shield. Years ago, after life had taken more than it gave, he chose this place far from noise, far from people, far from memories that still ached when he thought too long about them. Here, he didn't have to pretend to be okay. The land didn't care if he smiled or not. The horses didn't ask him why he avoided town or why he never spoke about his past. He walked toward the stable with a bucket in one hand, nodding slightly as the horses stirred at the sound of his steps. They trusted him. He fed them every morning, brushed them, checked their hooves, talked to them in a low voice even though they couldn't answer. It was enough. As he stepped inside the stable, something felt wrong. At first, he couldn't say what it was. Everything looked the same, the wooden beams, the stalls, the familiar smell of hay. But his instincts, sharpened by years of living alone, told him something had changed. One of the water buckets had been moved. A pile of hay near the far stall looked disturbed, as if someone had been there recently. He froze. No one came to his ranch. Not anymore. The neighbors were miles away, and strangers had no reason to wander this far. His hand tightened around the bucket as his eyes slowly scanned the stable. "Hello," he called, his voice steady but cautious. No answer. The horses shifted, uneasy, sensing his tension. He took a step forward, boots creaking against the wooden floor. Then he heard it, a faint sound, barely louder than breathing. He moved closer to the far stall. That was when he saw her. She was crouched low against the wall, half hidden by hay, her hair tangled, her face pale with fear. She looked up at him with wide eyes, ready to run if he moved too fast. Her dress was white but dirty and torn at the hem, like it had dragged across miles of road. A wedding dress. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world seemed to pause between them. The cowboy felt something tight in his chest, a feeling he hadn't known in years, surprise mixed with concern. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said slowly, raising one hand to show he meant no harm. She didn't answer right away. Her hands were shaking. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and tired. "Please, I just needed a place to hide." She didn't look dangerous. She looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. Fear clung to her like dust. "Are you alone?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." "You're on my land," he said. "I live here." He set the bucket down. "Stay here, I'll get you some food." When he returned to the stable, she accepted the food like it was a gift she hadn't expected. She ate slowly, carefully, like she was afraid it might disappear. They didn't talk much. He didn't ask her name. She didn't explain why she was there. The unspoken agreement between them was clear. No questions, no pressure. As the morning passed, he showed her an empty storage room near the barn where she could rest. It wasn't much, but it was safe. "You can stay for today," he said. "Figure things out." Every sound made him glance toward the barn. He told himself she would leave by nightfall, that this was temporary. Still, a strange warmth stirred beneath his guarded heart, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. As the sun climbed higher, memories crept in. He thought about the life he once had, the love he lost, the choices that led him here. He had built walls not because he hated people, but because losing them hurt too much. And now, without warning, someone had stepped into his carefully protected world. He didn't know it yet, but this quiet morning, the disturbed hay, the frightened woman in white, was the first crack in the walls he had spent years building. And once cracks appear, light has a way of finding its way in, whether a person is ready for it or not. The woman stayed quiet for most of that first day. She rested in the small storage room near the barn, sitting on an old blanket the cowboy had laid out for her. Sunlight slipped in through the cracks in the wooden walls, painting thin golden lines across the floor. She watched the dust float in the air and tried to calm her racing thoughts. Her body was safe for the moment, but her mind was still running. Outside, the cowboy went about his work, though nothing felt normal anymore. Every chore felt slower, heavier. He kept telling himself she was just passing through, that she would leave soon and his life would return to its steady rhythm. Still, he found himself listening for movement, checking the barn more often than necessary. By afternoon, the heat settled over the land. The woman stepped outside, careful and unsure, as if afraid she might cross some invisible line. She stood near the fence, watching the cowboy repair a loose board. For a while, she only observed him. There was something grounding about the way he worked. No rush, no show, just focus. "You can get some air," he said without turning around. "You don't have to hide." She took a few slow steps closer, stopping at a distance that felt safe. The white dress hung heavy on her now, stiff with dirt and sweat. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked. "You can wash up if you want," he said. "There's water by the pump. I can find you something else to wear. You don't have to do all this." Later, they sat on opposite ends of a wooden table outside the house, eating dinner as the sun began to lower. The sky turned soft shades of orange and pink. Crickets started their nightly song. She broke the silence first. "I didn't plan this," she said quietly. He nodded. "Most things aren't planned. Like you just decide and go, but it's not. It feels like tearing something out of yourself." "I was trying to breathe." The next morning she offered to help. "I don't want to just sit around," she said. "I can work." Work gave her something solid to hold on to. As days passed, a rhythm formed between them. They didn't talk much, but when they did, it mattered. Small things came out naturally. She mentioned growing up in a busy house, always surrounded by voices, expectations, plans made by others. He spoke about the land, how it taught patience and honesty. He did not talk about his loss. Not yet. One afternoon, rain rolled in unexpectedly. They took shelter in the barn, sitting on overturned crates as water drummed against the roof. The horses shifted calmly, used to storms. "I used to think silence meant something was wrong," she said suddenly. "Like someone was upset or something bad was about to happen. Now it feels safe." The easy thing would have been to brush it off, but something about the way she asked, no pressure, no curiosity for drama, made him speak. "I lost someone," he said, "and after that being around people felt like standing too close to a fire, warm but dangerous." That night, as stars filled the sky, both of them realized something quietly important. They weren't fixing each other. They weren't rescuing or escaping. They were simply sharing space, letting time do what it does best. And sometimes that is where healing begins. By the time the third week arrived, the ranch no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a pause between two lives. The woman no longer jumped at every sound, and the cowboy no longer checked the barn out of fear. Instead, they moved around each other with a quiet understanding, like two people who had learned the shape of each other's silence. Mornings began early. She woke before the sun now, not because she was afraid, but because her body had remembered how good it felt to start fresh. She would step outside, breathing in the cool air, watching the sky slowly change color. Sometimes the cowboy was already awake, fixing a fence or feeding the animals. Other times, she enjoyed the stillness alone. She had stopped wearing the borrowed clothes like they were temporary. They were just clothes now. The wedding dress stayed folded in a corner of the storage room. She hadn't decided what to do with it yet. Some days she felt ready to let it go. Other days she needed it to stay just a little longer as proof that what she ran from was real. Work became her anchor. She learned how to move calmly around the horses, how to read their moods. She learned which tools went where and how to patch small problems before they grew. The cowboy showed her without many words. He was patient, never correcting her sharply, never rushing her. That mattered more to her than he knew. One afternoon, while they were repairing a broken gate together, she made a mistake that caused the gate to slip. It didn't hurt anyone, but the noise startled her badly. She froze, her breath caught in her chest, old fear rising fast. "It's okay," he said immediately, steady and calm. "Nothing's broken." He realized how often the world made people feel that way without meaning to. That evening, they sat outside again, watching the sun fall behind the hills. She spoke more than usual, her voice thoughtful. "I used to think being strong meant never disappointing anyone," she said. "I bent myself into whatever shape was needed. I thought that was love. Now I think strength is knowing when something is breaking you." He woke before dawn, heart heavy, sitting on the edge of his bed with his head in his hands. When he stepped outside, he found her already awake, sitting on the steps, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars fade. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Some nights are louder than others." He sat down, and for a long time neither spoke. The quiet felt honest, not forced. "I don't talk about what happened," he said finally. "Not because I don't remember, but because I'm afraid if I start, I won't know how to stop. But I want you to understand why I keep my distance. I blamed myself for not seeing it coming, for trusting too much. But it never left. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, meaningful moments. They laughed more. They shared meals without long pauses. They trusted each other with deeper thoughts, even when words were few. Still, questions lingered in the air. How long would she stay? What would happen when she left? Neither asked. Some answers were easier to face later. One afternoon, a truck passed slowly on the distant road. Dust rose behind it. She watched it disappear, her chest tightening. "They might be looking for me," she said quietly. "Are you ready to be found?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not yet." The version of herself she had tried to be. She realized something important then. Running had saved her, but staying hidden forever would only become another kind of cage. Outside, the cowboy stood near the fence, looking out over the land. He knew this peace could not last forever, but for the first time in years, the thought of change didn't scare him as much. They were both standing at the edge of something new. Not a perfect future, not a simple solution, just a choice to face what came next with honesty instead of fear. And that choice, quiet and unspoken, was already beginning to heal them both. The change came quietly at first, like a shift in the wind before a storm. The woman felt it in her chest before she could explain it in words. She started waking up with a sense of urgency she had not felt before. The ranch no longer felt like just a safe place to rest. It felt like a place preparing her for something else. One morning, while she was gathering eggs, she noticed fresh tire tracks near the edge of the land. They were faint but clear enough to see. Her heart skipped. She stood still for a long moment, listening, watching, trying to decide whether fear or logic was guiding her thoughts. When she told the cowboy, he did not react quickly. He walked with her to the spot, studied the tracks, and nodded slowly. "Someone passed by," he said. "Could be nothing. Could be someone lost." That day, both of them were quieter than usual. Work continued, but the air felt heavier. She kept glancing toward the road. He found himself watching her, noticing how her shoulders tensed at distant sounds. In the afternoon, a call came from town. He hadn't used the phone much, but a neighbor had tried to reach him. The woman stood nearby, pretending not to listen, but every word felt loud. After he hung up, he looked at her carefully. "People are asking questions, nothing specific yet." Memories returned, faces, voices, expectations, the feeling of being watched and measured. She realized she could not stay hidden forever, no matter how safe the ranch felt. In the early morning, she went outside and found the cowboy already awake, leaning against the fence, staring at the horizon. "I think I'm running out of time," she said. He nodded. "I know. I don't want to leave like I did before. I don't want to disappear again." That doesn't just vanish. He listened, his jaw tight, his hands resting still at his sides. I stayed because it was expected, she said. I smiled because it was easier than explaining, and one day I realized I couldn't recognize myself anymore. Facing it is harder, but it's real. You don't have to. Whatever you choose, you won't be alone in this moment. I don't even know who I'll be. But now, the thought of returning to the old silence felt heavier than before. I'll keep going, he said finally, but I won't pretend I'm untouched anymore. She stood holding it, feeling its weight. I don't think I need this anymore, she said. He didn't tell her what to do, he never did. She laid it down, not in anger but with quiet acceptance. It was no longer a symbol of failure. It was proof of how far she had come. When a car finally arrived later that day, it stopped at the edge of the land. Someone stepped out, calling her name. The voice was cautious, unsure. She walked forward on her own. The cowboy stayed where he was, not because he didn't care, but because he respected her strength. He watched as she spoke calmly, clearly, without apology. He saw the way she stood, no longer small, no longer shrinking. She turned back once, meeting his eyes. There was gratitude there and something deeper. Not a promise, not a plan, just understanding. As the car drove away, the ranch felt quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. The cowboy stood alone, breathing in the familiar air, feeling something new settle inside him. The past had come looking, and instead of breaking him, it had shown him what was possible. He returned to his work, but his steps felt lighter. The land was still wide and empty, but it no longer felt closed off. He knew now that healing did not mean staying untouched. It meant letting life change you and choosing to stand anyway. Months passed, and the ranch returned to its familiar rhythm, but the cowboy knew it was not the same as before. The land still stretched wide under the open sky, the horses still greeted him every morning, and the wind still carried the same quiet songs through the grass. Yet something inside him had shifted. The silence no longer felt like a wall. It felt like space where something new could exist. After the woman left, the first few weeks were the hardest. Not because he regretted letting her go, but because her presence had reminded him of parts of himself he had buried for a long time. He noticed the empty chair at the table. He noticed how meals felt shorter. He noticed how he sometimes turned toward the barn, half expecting to hear her footsteps or her soft voice calling out a question. But instead of closing himself off again, he let those feelings exist. He worked steadily, repairing fences, tending the land, caring for the animals. The routine grounded him, but now it also gave him time to think. He thought about the way she had arrived, frightened, unsure, worn down by a life that didn't fit her. He thought about the strength it took for her to leave again, not by running, but by choosing to face what waited for her. It made him question his own choices. For years, he had told himself that staying alone was the safest way to live, that keeping his world small meant it couldn't break him again. But now he understood something important. Safety and healing were not the same thing. One afternoon, he drove into town for the first time in a long while. The streets felt louder than he remembered, the faces unfamiliar. He felt out of place at first, but he didn't turn around. He bought supplies, spoke politely to the clerk, even exchanged a few words with a neighbor he hadn't seen in years. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a step, and that was enough. Meanwhile, the woman was building her life piece by piece. The days after she left the ranch were not easy. Facing people from her past required courage she didn't always feel she had. There were hard conversations, moments of doubt, nights when fear tried to pull her backward. But she stayed honest. She spoke clearly. She stopped apologizing for choosing herself. She found a small place to live, simple and quiet. She found work that allowed her to breathe, to think, to feel like herself again. Slowly, she learned how to trust her own voice. She learned that strength did not mean never being afraid. It meant moving forward even when fear was present. Sometimes, late at night, she thought about the ranch. About the sound of the horses, the smell of hay, the way the cowboy listened without trying to fix her. She missed the peace, but more than that, she missed who she had become there. They didn't speak often. A message every now and then. A short call. No pressure. No promises. Just quiet updates, honest and simple. And that was enough, too. Seasons changed. The land turned golden, then pale with frost, then green again. Time moved the way it always does, slowly, steadily, without asking permission. One day, nearly a year after they first met, the woman drove out toward the ranch. She hadn't planned it for long. She just woke up knowing she needed to go. Not to hide, not to escape, but to return as someone whole. When she arrived, the cowboy was mending a fence. He looked up, surprised, then smiled, not a wide smile, but a real one that reached his eyes. "You came back," he said. "I did," she replied. They stood there for a moment, unsure who should speak next. Then they both laughed softly, the tension easing. They walked together, talking as if no time had passed. She told him about her life now, the challenges, the victories, the lessons learned the hard way. He told her about town, about opening himself up just a little more to the world. "You look different," he said. "So do you," she answered. They sat outside as the sun lowered, the familiar sky painting itself in warm colors. There was no rush, no weight of expectation. Just two people who had met at a turning point in their lives and had grown because of it. "I don't know what this means," she said honestly. "I don't either," he replied. They shared a quiet smile. What they understood without needing to say it was that their story was never about rescue or romance alone. It was about timing. About two wounded people crossing paths at exactly the moment they needed to learn something important, not about each other, but about themselves. They didn't promise forever. They didn't rewrite the past. They simply chose to stay present, to see where life might lead if they faced it with honesty instead of fear. As the stars appeared overhead, the ranch felt alive again, not because it had changed, but because the people standing on it had. And sometimes that is the truest kind of ending. Not a perfect one, not a dramatic one, just a beginning shaped by courage, quiet strength, and the healing power of being seen.